right, so why don't we convene? It's 8:03. Is anyone aware of anybody else who may be joining? No? You can all hear me, yes? Celia, you sent around the minutes, I think, is that correct? Has anybody got any comments, corrections, changes to the minutes?
There were a couple things I think Rich brought up. I think fairly minor, right? One was about when our next meeting was. And I thought we had agreed that we meet in July, not in August. And that's what we
That's
put
what
in.
I recall also.
Yeah, and we put that in the newsletter, but anyway, so that's a minor thing. I can't remember what the other was.
Well, the other one was, I think Rich raised the question that's in the minutes of whether those infamous letters of thanks to DOT and to others actually went out or not. I haven't seen any evidence that they did, but it would be nice to find out whether they did.
I think Cynthia was.
That was in the minutes. That was not what I raised. What I raised was far more trivial, which is just that it listed me as the host, which I thought was giving me far too much credit for just using my Zoom link.
Okay, I don't know whether Cynthia sent out those letters. I know that she was supplied with the letterhead because I did that. And she may have done it, she may not have, in her absence and not being able to contact her right now. I guess that has to stay a question mark till she's back in play. But it's a good question to follow up on. Okay, so we can't do anything about treasurer's report or BAIP report as far as I know, but we can approve the minutes with the corrections that have been submitted. Motion to approve them, somebody?
I move to approve the minutes with the correct.
Second,
Yeah.
Gary seconding. Anybody opposed? All right, so we're good on the minutes. Thank you, Celia, for doing such a good job with the minutes on such a regular basis. We will have to table treasurer's report, BAIP report.
Do you want me, Hetty, I'm sorry, excuse me for interrupting. Do you want me to just give you the headlines on the treasurer's report?
Yes, please.
Over the last month, our balance went up by about $2,000, largely as a result of the really terrific turnout of membership checks after the newsletter went out. And also as a result of payment from a number of the advertisers on that. There's about another 1,300 to come out of that to pay. The check's gone out, but it went out in August for paying for the printing and mailing of the newsletters. But we're still going up by 1,000 or so a month, and so we're at $34,240 at the moment on balance.
I would like to add that there seemed to be a big boost in membership also. A lot of new names came through. And I feel like it happened after we announced about the town hall. So I don't know how that ended up being members for the Block Association, but it's a good thing. So we have more people on our email list.
That's great.
Is it more names on the email list, more money, or both?
I don't know if they were connected with the money. I got the names from Kamal in some cases, so that would be connected to money. And I get an automatic thing when somebody subscribes to the email list on the website.
Well, just by comparison, we received about $1,500 membership fees over the last month, almost all of it in the second half of the month. And months before, we I think received only $500. So that that's a significant bump.
From my
So,
recollection, that is the pattern that happens as the newsletter goes out. We get a little surge of money. It tapers off. Another newsletter goes out. We get a surge of money. Go ahead, Richard.
Someone made the point that the town hall caused a lot of money to come in, and I'm wondering if more hostility might be good for business.
I accept your thanks.
All right, thank you, Gary, for the headline news. Any other comments on the treasurer's report? Going once. Going twice. Newsletter and advertising report. I can't speak to the advertising and I don't see Terrence on the Zoom. The newsletter, as you all know, was delayed in June a little bit so that we could announce the town hall meeting. But as a result, it really did go out rather late in June. But I have no issue with that because I really do think it was better to hold it so that we could make sure that every single apartment had as good a chance as possible to know about it. It is possible that some didn't because the distribution network is such that if someone receives the newsletter and was out of town or something like that, it could just be sitting under a door somewhere and not be seen. I got a very nice note from Nur and Bobby Beck. They were very pleased with the coverage of their Hall of Fame membership and asked me to please thank both Amy and Ariana, which I've done. It's on my to-do list to check in with Amy and Ariana and find out their schedules for mid to late August, because that's when we'll go back into production for the September issue, AKA fall. I can't even say the word fall right now. So once I do that and figure out a lineup, you'll be getting that email you always get. If anybody has ideas in advance of that, please let me know. One of the things that we'll need to announce is an agenda item coming up later, and Mary, it'll fall into your department, I think, to speak to it, which has to do with Halloween. We can use the September newsletter as a way of getting volunteers, publicizing, starting the wheels rolling if we care to. What else? Amy, do you have anything you want to add about newsletter? Hang on, Rick.
No, I guess I'm guessing you didn't get a response to volunteers for a couple of things that we had, right? So
But not the newsletter ones, but many of them are info at responses. So they could be sitting in Cynthia's computer or not.
Okay.
Don't know.
Well, we'll certainly want to put something about Halloween, and also start seriously thinking about a spring street block fair or whatever we're going to do, because we really have to start planning early for that.
Agree. Go ahead, Rich, you're up.
So at risk of Hetty killing me, what I'm hearing is that the newsletter generates more people giving donations. And are we doing it quarterly right now?
Yes.
Well,
Might it make sense to have the same amount of content, but smaller issues more frequently as a way of just staying in touch with people and potentially generating enough more donations and engagement that it's worth the extra distribution costs?
It's an interesting idea. We don't know whether more frequent will mean more money because people pay their annual or they pay quarterly. But if we're coming out, let's say 6 times a year instead of 4 times a year, they may just take the same amount and divide it differently. So you could be right that we would get more dollars, or we could just spread the dollars out more over the course of the year. So from the, income producing perspective, not sure. From the workload perspective, I can tell you with great certainty that although I wouldn't object to that happening, I would not personally be able to make it happen.
And the question there is just whether smaller issues might take somewhat less work. And I know just putting out an issue in itself is work, whether it's 1 page or 10 pages. But I wonder if having the same amount of content but spread out more, more distributed might increase engagement while not being a ton more effort.
Right, I get your point. If let's say instead of 4 issues, we did 8, it wouldn't be half as much work each time. It would be a lot more work, like 100% more work to do it, because
Yeah,
the
totally get
time-consuming
that, yep.
part isn't really reading the content, but all of the various steps in assigning and the backing and forth with the authors, and then all of the various iterations of the layouts that we look at. Amy's job, where she is the one who reads all the content very carefully, twice, maybe the amount of time wouldn't be affected very much. I'm thinking, Rich, that we could accomplish what you're suggesting in another way, which is, let's say we still stuck with a quarterly newsletter, but then in between those quarters, perhaps did like a single broadsheet. If we could find somebody else who was willing to produce that, we
What if
could
we-
reduce the content in the quarterlies in order to seed that. would
Another
have to be
option would
something.
be to do emails, like just to do it digitally.
That was what I was gonna say. I mean, one option would be once a month, an email from the Block Association with a page of whatever, and then a donation. Like that only gets to the email list, but it's a lot less work than trying to print something and get it out. What I would add to that is, if we were going to do that, I would really want it to be a group effort to figure out what the content should be. I don't think it should fall on Hetty or me to determine that.
Gary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I only have 3 months of data, so, it could be wrong as well, but my impression is that about 1/3 of the people are paying $35 a quarter on this now. I think another third of the people, almost 1/3 of the people, are paying 150 or 140 or some number like that each, once a year on it. And then there are some number of people that are paying $12 a month or $10 a month or other things like that. So I think if there's additional money to be had, it's going to be through new memberships rather than it's going to be like having, more people giving more money, more of our current people giving more money to the operation. But, so I wouldn't do it for the reason of trying to get existing donors to add on. I think we should, if we do something, we should probably do something which attracts new people to the organization.
Gary, the visibility of the organization and the boosting of the involved membership has been a topic that we have discussed periodically for many, many years. And one of the reasons we like having new people on the board, such as yourself, is that it gets brought up all over again. And sometimes we get new ideas about how to accomplish it. So keep it coming. And if you have an idea for how you think we might work toward that, throw it in the mix.
Let me
That's
drop
where I
in.
thought Richard
Yeah.
was going to. More participation, not more money. Money doesn't
Right.
seem to be a problem. at the moment. I mean, it's coming in faster than it's going out.
Right now, because we have no security guard, yes. If we did, it would be a different math. But the active participation of people is seriously an issue because you can't build the membership base without the volunteerism. You can have all the money in the world, and that's not going to get you more members. You need the people who are willing to staff events and come up with ideas for events and make all that stuff happen. And we've been foundering a little bit because of not having exciting new blood like Mary to help us do some of those things. Interesting ideas. I've been making some
Could I-
notes. Let's revisit them. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I just want to make a point that, for one, obviously our mission is not to be profit generating or profit maximizing. The other is, I think the newsletter, if we think about what the Block Association does, the newsletter is one of the most valuable things. And it might not, our mission might not be to get new members. It might just be to get new people to sign up and give us their email addresses to stay in touch with what's happening on the block, whether it's new businesses opening or, featuring important or notable people on the block. There's a lot of great stuff in the newsletter that keeps us together as a community, even for people who aren't members. So I wonder if, even putting up signs on the corners, just saying like, sign up for our email newsletter might achieve that and be worth doing.
Are you thinking for people outside of our catchment area?
No, for those people who live in our community but are not members and are not on our email list, trying to build the email list,
Right.
if nothing else, but to build our community.
Amy, what's the current number on the email list? Do you know?
It's about 700.
So it's a fraction.
708.
I'll just say also in terms of like posting signage, I found that when promoting the Halloween event, I went personally and went to each corner, put up signs, put up information of like where people can donate, went to the buildings, put up signage by where the mailboxes were as well. And I think that was a huge help in just generating the candy donations leading up to. I mean, I had boxes of candy being dropped off daily, as well as just like the foot traffic that we ultimately got at the last two parades. So I think it might be a good idea to put up some signage, if not only on like the corners of, the 4-6 block radius, but also in the lobby of each of the buildings where the mailboxes are. And the doormen were happy to let me do it. They were, no pushback whatsoever.
Mary, we routinely, in fact, do that whenever we have an event. We have people in each building who get a copy of the flyer emailed to them, and then they can print it and hang it up. If you're more inclined to walk around and do it yourself, no problem with that too. The chronic problem with hanging up the flyers on the street corners is that technically we're not allowed to do it. And there have been times in the past where the city goes around and starts fining organizations for doing it. It used to be way, 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 way worse. I'm going to say back in the 90s, every street corner telephone pole, street light pole was plastered with advertisements for dog walkers and plaster and painting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And even the community organization stuff was getting contacted by the city and fined. And I think we were fined once, and Cynthia was able to pull some strings and get us out of having to pay it. But it does run a risk of a financial penalty. I don't know what the numbers are for the penalties these days, but that's why we have shied away from
I
it.
lucked out the last 2 years when it didn't get flagged.
We've been lucky, it's been fine. And maybe nobody cares anymore because it's not plasterers and dog walkers and babysitters and things like that. So nobody's looking at it anymore.
Hetty,
Maybe it's just in the
Rochelle has her
building.
hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rochelle, take a turn.
Okay, you caught me while I was eating, but
Oh, sorry. You want a minute? We can come back to you.
okay, I just wanted to say that I think it would be sad if the newsletter, which is really terrific, was only sent out online. I think there are a lot of people, especially as they age, who don't keep up with their emails or may not even do email. So I would just be very sad to see that happen. That was the only comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, we every time we discuss that, Rochelle, we decide not to do that. We did it for a little while during COVID because everybody was very nervous about, you know, going around and doing stuff like that. And we didn't feel comfortable asking the distributors to put themselves at risk. And so many people were away and like that. But because of exactly what Gary just said about the flurry of financial contributions that we get following the distribution of the paper newsletter, and many people do still use the paper envelope that comes with the paper newsletter, our inclination has been to continue doing it that way. So fear not and enjoy your dinner.
Okay.
Okay. Any other newsletter topic related thoughts, comments?
I'd like to make a comment on behalf of the distributors. If you were to increase the number of deliveries that needed to be made each year, I think some of us who are in big buildings, it puts a little burden on us too.
I was thinking of that, Ginger, and I'm glad you raised it.
Yeah, so it's important, yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and there are a lot of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The large buildings like Ginger's and the Broadmoor, there are people, if not on each floor, then people who do 2 or 3 floors.
In the big buildings on West End Avenue.
Right. And there are people who
building.
get those newsletters to those floor captains. So there's got to be, I don't know, several dozen people involved in the newsletter distribution. I've never counted, but I probably should.
Would that be interesting, even to make a newsletter article out of it and to thank all the people who've been distributing? Because lots of people, they just stay on for years and years doing it.
You're right, and that's a great idea.
Yes, I think that, yeah, so you have an article. I
just put it on my list for fall.
Great.
In fact, speaking of that, reminds me that we've had 2 retirements, and I put it in the Help Wanted in the last issue, or maybe 2 issues. The person who used to distribute from West End to Riverside on 102nd Street, David Reich, has retired from doing it. And the person who has done, it's mainly 103rd between West End and Broadway, with one exception, has retired.
You can include their names in the article and thank them.
Great, I will.
It would be appropriate. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. Have retired, and I did those myself. This David's I've been doing for a year or more already. Marv, who just retired, I did his this time. I'd really like to find people to pick that up. So if you know of anybody who live on those particular blocks who could be engaged this way, it's tops 1 hour 4 times a year. It's really not a big deal commitment. And sometimes they'll get thanked in the newsletter. Please, the personal touch sometimes helps. Go ahead, Virginia.
Right, and yes, and you can also make the push for the new people or people coming onto new in the block that want to get to know their neighbors or get involved. It's a good way to get involved with your building.
Without it being a big time commitment.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
thanks, Ginger.
Thank you.
All right, I'm moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, the mediation meeting recap. I was not at it, and I have not yet had a chance to watch the videos, so I'm not the person to speak to that. Who was there, who would like to speak? I'll make notes and give you all a minute or 2 or 3 to talk about how it went. Raise your hand if you want the floor.
Let me start. First, I thought it was actually a pretty good meeting. I thought there was lots of emotion that came tumbling out as a result of things, but that always happens. And there were lots of things said that I wouldn't personally say, but you know, the stuff got out, and that was of value, I think, to all of us. I thought, so to cut to the chase on it, I thought that the conversation that Herb had with Emily from DOT toward the end of the meeting, in which the question was, if we were to try to develop some criteria for what's the success of the proposals for this street, what would those criteria be? I think that actually is the way we ought to be proceeding on this, which is that to work with them and see whether we could actually develop a list of things that 2 years from now, if we think of the project as an experiment, nothing in the project seems to me to be completely irretrievable. I mean, it can be taken away 2 years from now if we're going to do that. But that would be a very useful thing. It would be useful not only for us, so that we can track the things that we think are valuable on that street, but it would also be useful to the wider city where they need these kinds of criteria to evaluate other places that are going on. So that was my takeaway on the meeting.
Thank you, Gary. Herb, you were starting to speak just when Gary jumped in, so go on, you go next.
First, I was going to say I didn't think I should speak because I was a participant, but given what Gary said, I would like to develop some criteria. One of the things I had planned to talk about, but frankly, the mediator threw me off balance by telling me I had only 2 minutes to speak. And I had other plans for what I was going to say. But one of the things I was going to say is that, as far as I can tell, there are no success criteria. In fact, I have never heard what the requirements were. Peter expressed some ideas that I thought were relevant, but that I hadn't heard before, frankly. I think each one of the areas that Peter defined in terms of safety, for example, we could define what the problem is that we're solving, as well as what the criteria are for success in each of the other areas. I'm not sure that we agree right now on what the problems are, so I think the discussion should start way back there. But I think that, you know, basically what we need to do is talk to each other. And I think that more than anything else, what came out of the meeting was that Open Streets has been totally divisive in a way that the community has never been divided. So there was a man in the back of the room, I think his name was Paul, who talked about that, how the community has always managed in the past to hear each other and resolve conflict, and that this isn't happening now. So I hope that you know, what happens now is that we actually do talk to each other.
I'm curious, has anyone been in touch with the panelists since the event? Herb or Peter, maybe you could speak to that.
And you mean in terms of the mediation people or the other people?
The mediation people, because they said they were going to follow up with smaller groups and all of that.
No, they have not done anything about scheduling. I mean, what the promise was, okay, that there would be small mediation sessions without, you know, an audience.
Right.
In other words, you know, Peter and us, and you know, some of the people who are on this call, I think. And I think that they just haven't done anything yet. They generally don't move quickly. So that's not a surprise.
Wasn't it only last Thursday and this is Tuesday? And there
Yeah.
was a weekend in between?
This is, you know, I didn't expect anything to happen this quickly. And also,
I would confirm her what you just said about the divisiveness in the neighborhood. You know, I moved into my apartment in 1984 and I've lived there ever since. And I've been on the board of the Block Association starting a few years after that. And there's never been anything like this in that chunk of history anyway.
Mhm.
Anybody else want to add anything about the meeting?
I'd like to add something.
I
Go
would
ahead,
say,
Celia.
Yes, I just want to say, I hope everybody received the information about the list of questions that were compiled by the Peace Institute based on the responses they received from the RSVPs. And in that same message, I assume everybody saw they had an attachment of the video itself as well as the questions.
I didn't perceive that. I saw a reference to the video, but I didn't see the questions.
well, I could forward it to everyone on board. I mean, it would be easy enough.
I think it was sent only to panelists, not to.
Again, I don't want to, swoop over the conflicts that there, but you know, there has never been a proposal for this kind of change to the neighborhood either. In the past 20 years.
That's true. There hasn't been a similar initiative.
I would
Rochelle,
like,
did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say that I received this compilation that included the video of the meeting and also a very lengthy, I think 20 pages of all the comments people had written in when they signed up, including my comments. So I think it was sent to everybody that registered online, I imagine.
That was my understanding. If you had registered for the meeting, then they sent it.
Okay. There's a thought there in terms of being more in touch with our residents, members, constituents, however you want to call them, is that perhaps that's our next email to the list. Is here's a link to the recording of the meeting. If you weren't able to attend, you should watch. And here are the questions that were discussed. And we'd be happy to hear from you, and you can respond to, and you know, info at or some other repository for the responses. Peter, I see your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was going to make the same suggestion, and there's no reason. Maxine posted the PDF of all the questions on her Facebook page too. It's quasi-public, so there's no reason. You know, I don't know that everybody wants it, but certainly if anybody does, they're more than welcome to get it. You know, this actually came up at the panel in terms of, I have not been contacted by the Peace Institute since, or even before the panel. Herb was quite surprised by that, but I had actually reached out a couple of times just wanting to know, you know, how the panel was going to run and just logistical things. And I never had that conversation. So that was a little bit odd, but certainly there were lots and lots of voices that were heard there, and it was very well attended. I don't know how many people we had on Zoom. Does anybody know that?
I was told that there were 30. I don't know. If that was
that's
Okay.
what I heard also.
I
Yeah.
just want to
Okay.
clarify something that while I was surprised that you had no communication, I asked some of the same questions you asked, like what's going to happen? You know, not only what's going to happen at that meeting, but what's the plan? What's the process? What can we expect after that? And I never got that in writing in an email, nor did I get it during the introduction at the meeting when I expected it as well. So I think we're a little bit at sea, even though we were told that there will be subsequent meetings, smaller, face to face.
Right. So we'll have to see. you know, the mediator certainly, you know, she's trained to listen and she did what she was trained to do, which is very helpful, just like we do in healthcare, is you repeat back what your clients have said as best as you can to make sure that they were heard. And of course, a lot of the anger results from people who feel they haven't been heard. So we all need to do as good a job as we can to listen to each other's concerns and try and come to a respectful resolution. You know, so I think it was a good educational evening. I'm sorry, you know, the personal attacks and things like that. I really wish that they could there could be some counseling that really doesn't, it's not in anybody's, that is not in anybody's interest. So I've not done that throughout this process. And I think it's really counterproductive to be continually attacking people or try and suggest that they are buying people off or paying people off or even engaged in illegal conduct, which some of the accusations, frankly, are illegal under New York City law. So to the extent that people could be counseled not to attack each other we're talking about a street here. We're not talking about individual people. I think we would all be better off in terms of quieting the anger. So that's pardon me?
I'd like to say something at an appropriate time.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm going to try and put my hand in, figure out
Okay.
how to do that on the Zoom thing. I'm done. Sorry, go ahead. Pretend that my hand is down at this point.
I attended the meeting on Zoom, and I agree with what Amy's husband told her, that there were about 30 people on Zoom. And that's what I saw too, is in terms of participation. I would also like to mention that there was an impolite comment directed toward the people for parking or Upper West Siders for parking that came from someone. And as far as I can tell, it was an executive who does not live in our neighborhood, but he was a public figure and he was upset. And he said some nasty thing to Maxine. And I believe Herb was very offended by it too. But please keep in mind that it was a bad moment for him from his perspective, and he does not live in our neighborhood.
Can we stay on that just for a moment? I think that there were quite a few people there who do not live in our neighborhood. And frankly, in advance, we asked the mediation people to do screening and ask for addresses, and it was not done. I'd say there was a large part of the audience, in fact, who don't live in the neighborhood. And that was
so. Herb, I think again, you're show me the evidence for that. We define our neighborhood in BAIP as 97th to 110th Street. And that's the neighborhood. The 15-year-old Marie who lives on 105th Street and walks through 103rd Street every day, was raised in Douglas, is a member of the community. We asked people to register if they are neighborhood-based employees, so that even if somebody who doesn't live but works in the neighborhood, that they were invited on the RSVP form. So, for example, that would include all of our youth ambassadors. Now, they live in the neighborhood, pretty much all of them do, or very close to it, certainly in terms of the BAIP. But this, you know, this notion that you're being invaded by outside interests is just, I'm sorry, but you don't have any evidence for that. You do have some people. We had the chair of CB4 who was there, who knows a lot about community boards and this issue. She has a perfect right to be there. But I don't think we should be attacking people who live on 105th Street, which was done publicly, a 15-year-old kid for being outside of the neighborhood, which is what was done at the meeting.
Peter, I don't think we can resolve this tonight, so I don't want.
Right, I was just
I don't
going
wanna
to jump in
respond
and
to-
say, we're not going to solve those things tonight. I happen to feel very strongly that nobody should be attacking anybody, whether they're in the neighborhood, out of the neighborhood. There's just no reason to be offensive, no matter how upset, angry, offended you may be about the topic. I think we can and all must be at least civil to one another. At our meetings, at the mediation meetings, wherever. Go ahead, Amy. I see you jumping out.
Thank you. A couple things. First, just on a practical level, happy to send out an email blast to the membership about this with the link and the questions, or the link to the questions, or whatever that is. But there are two recordings. One is the one Rich made, which is in 4 parts and very easy to follow and good cameramanship, or whatever the term is.
Cinematography.
Cinematography, thank you. But it is in 4 parts. The other one is the Zoom, which is not great cinematography. It's a little hard to read. At least what I saw, most of the picture is Celia and another person, and on the
Yes.
side of the group. I feel so bad for you, Celia, for 2 hours. You had to keep it in.
I was making faces.
I thought you did a good job not making faces.
To,
But
just
my
to
preference would be-
minimize credit for me once again, but much of the meeting, my shot was of Gary's foot. So I don't know that it was great cinematography, just to point that out.
All right, well, my preference would be to put Rich's on, but I'm open, whatever anybody wants, I'll do. I just wanted to bring that up.
They're both on now on the website, on the YouTube channel. So
So I
that
just
works.
include both. So that was one thing. The second thing is just a general comment, which I made to Mary at the end of the meeting, which is, I think one thing to keep in mind for all of us is that this event, this traumatic event for our neighborhood, has happened in the wake of this pandemic. And I think a lot of people feel like something was taken from them. And there's a lot of anger anyway. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of unhappiness. So it may not be the street that's the issue. It may be, and I'm not minimizing it at all. I'm just saying that psychologically people may be responding to bigger things than just what's happening on the street. So I do think we all have to be more generous with each other. And there was a lot of name calling in that meeting on both sides. The comment to that young woman who was speaking, I thought was a racist dog whistle. That was my opinion. And I know who made that comment, and I was shocked by it. But, some people who were there live on 101st, but they have a car and they need to park in the neighborhood. So that's outside of our little district, but I think it's still relevant. So 105th, is that so different? 104th? I mean, I think it's a mistake to
I don't
limit it.
think there's anyone who's going to argue about where the lines are, whether it's 101st or it's 96th Street. Okay. I don't think that's the issue.
Okay. Anyway, those were my more than 2 cents.
I can't imagine why anybody who is not either a resident of our general area, let's say 96 to 110th, for lack of any other descriptor, or an employee or a frequent visitor because their elderly parent lives there or works in one of the stores on Broadway, whatever it is. I don't think anybody who doesn't have a vested interest right here is really going to make the time to slog through all of this. Are they? Herb, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting myself completely. I have to know the name of your dog.
The dog, his name.
Yeah.
Fanny.
Fanny, I keep seeing her pop in and pop
Yes,
out.
she's in and out of the call. I would say, Hetty, that I would agree with you. Why would anyone be there? But there were people there who I would just identify as transportation alternatives who have nothing to do with the neighborhood. They have an interest in reducing the ownership of private cars, but I don't think they particularly care whether it's Seattle or Brooklyn or this neighborhood.
I see. So an interest in the cause, but not the specific neighborhood.
I have one more question and then I'll stop, I hope. One of the panelists was associated with Community Board 7. His name is Max Vandervliet. And I didn't see him on the panel.
He wasn't there.
He didn't show up? Did that help you as far as balance is concerned? Balance of the panelists? Was his absence helpful to you?
No,
Or was it hurtful or frustrating?
it was frustrating. What was frustrating was not so much that he wasn't there, it's that he was supposed to be there. He and Cynthia were going to talk about how we got to the point that we're at. And I understand from Nancy that she felt Cynthia did quite a good job, very fair, accurate report. So I don't know that it would have mattered that much. The problem really was for me that there was no definition about what the agenda was. There were no time assignments. We didn't know what was happening. The mediator kept changing. So she told me 2 minutes, 8 minutes. Then the sequence was just happened to be the way we were sitting. It was the woman from DOT, Emily, and then me, and then Peter, and then Maxine. There was no logic to any of this. And we had wanted to plan ahead the same way that Peter said he wanted to know what was happening. We wanted to know what was happening. We thought it'd be really easy to negotiate a very fair, rational agenda. It didn't happen. The fact that Max dropped off at literally at the last minute, I think was a very minor issue. I don't know how to measure that effect.
Gary,
Thank you.
go ahead, Gary, you had your hand up.
His hand
Unmute.
Unmute.
I see you, Gary, but you have to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we can't lip read.
You're right. I was coughing and I wanted to keep you out of
Oh,
my
thank you.
coughs
We
out.
appreciate it. Richard, I see your hand up after Gary. You're up.
Where do we go from here on this? I think it is true that the Peace Institute did a terrible job of organizing this thing. I mean, they weren't in touch with anybody. They didn't have a agenda. It was just, they just appeared. I think their theory about it was they were going to come there and they're going to listen to what everybody has to say, and then they'll figure out what to do afterwards. But I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to figure out what to do. And the question is, in a way, our group is the kind of core of resolving this thing. How are we going to move forward? Are we going to depend upon them for the next round as well? Or are we going to say, look, we're going to figure out a way to organize to make some progress on this and thank them very much for what they've done so far and move along. I'm not confident that the Peace Institute can do anything other than the kind of standard mediation technique, which is that you create a bunch of small groups in and you try to, come to small group consensus, and then you add on people. It's not a question of so much of consensus. It's a question of, we have a project sitting there that's been approved and it's about ready to go. I think we should have somebody in our group take the initiative in trying to figure out a process by which we can come to some agreement on this.
I think it would be a shame to let the momentum of having had a meeting that it seems like some good progress can come out of, just die on the vine. But I think in that it has only been a few days and Cynthia is unavailable, that we do need to give it a little time, and toward the end of the week or beginning of next week, see if Cynthia is able to resurface, and depending on her availability, stamina, and ability to actually help move this process along, then we make the decision about, okay, what comes next. But I think we do need to give it a few days. Richard, I said you would go after Gary.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize in advance. I was at a work event in Brooklyn and figured I'd stay above ground and just start walking. So I find myself on the Manhattan Bridge, and I hope that no Q trains go while I talk. So I have a few thoughts. Number one, which a number of people have said, I think they say that a good mediation, everyone walks away disappointed, but not because of the process. And I think that the process here was, I think everyone would agree, was not optimal, to put it very nicely. And I think there was a complete breakdown in communication. I think no one on any side seemed to know what was happening. No one knew what the format was. No one knew what the agenda was. No one knew who was speaking. And I think that left a lot of people very unhappy with how things went. And I think that's unfortunate. Because I don't think that it achieved what it might have in trying to bring down the temperature, just because so many people were blindsided by how the meeting went. So that's one thought. Number two is people have brought up how the neighborhood has never been this divisive, and I think it's incumbent on all of us. And here comes the cue, so I apologize. Can you still hear me, or should I wait until the train goes by?
I can hear you fine, and I don't hear the train at all.
So I think one thing we need to recognize is that the divisiveness, we need to bring the temperature down, but a lot of the divisiveness is that we're talking about a major change or some degree of change to the block. And to the extent that that hasn't happened, there hasn't been contention because things have been largely status quo. So I think, with change comes some degree of disagreement. And I think we just have to figure out how to work through that. I know Cynthia, it seems that there's a health issue. I'm not aware of exactly what it is, and I don't know if others are. I hope she's well, and I hope she gets back soon. I don't know to what extent the breakdown in communication was that people were expecting her to do more, and if that might have been a factor. I also, as I put in an email, was concerned about her speaking on behalf of the Block Association, which effectively she still did by saying that she was chair and she was there for the whole process. I think that that's something that shouldn't happen. And if someone's speaking either in their personal capacity or in the Block Association capacity, naming that they are the chair of the Block Association, we need to see what they're going to say in advance. The last thing is, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, based on what you're saying and what Gary had said a few minutes before you, it seems like one of the things we've learned is that in order to move forward, a different sort of process needs to happen. That's something that is more organized and better controlled in terms of the level of anger that's expressed, and a little bit more transparent before whatever the next step even happens would all contribute to it being more successful.
And that leads to my final point, which a few other people brought up. I thought the one thing that could be a real positive that came out of last Thursday night was the discussion about measuring success. And I think that's something that DOT was very open to. I think that's something that should be the content of a follow-up meeting. And I don't know that we can rely on Peace Institute to make that happen. I don't know what the next step is to make that happen, but where to listen to all parties and just talk through what the objectives are, how we measure, how we define those objectives, and then how we look back and define success, I think could be a really positive outcome from this entire process. And I think we might talk about just how we make that happen. And before another cue comes, I'm going back on mute.
Thank you, Richard.
I agree. I might, Gary has decades of experience doing that kind of thing. I mean, he, at ground zero, the reconstruction, if we think 103rd Street is contentious, we all know how strong the feelings were there, and he was in the middle of the planning of the whole site. So we actually have somebody with decades of experience in leading or being a part of the leadership of efforts that did that kind of thing. If Gary were willing to step up and propose some criteria for success, I think we could learn a lot from him based on the many decades that he's done this professionally and as an academic and written books about it, I believe. Not to put you on the spot, Gary, but
Peter's all, I'm going to hire Peter as a promoter at some point of my career. So no, but I'm willing to help on it. But I guess what I feel is it's not something that one person writes. It's got to be something which we get all of the people who have views about this in a room and try to collectively scope out. I felt that Peter's 3 points of objectives were really interesting, and I'd never heard of it before that in that form. I'm sure Herb's got a set of criteria. Richard has. I'm sure everybody on this program today has some views about that, and so we just need to have a process by which we can engage.
I'm wondering. Since Peter just put Gary on the spot, if I might put Herb on the spot as well to work with Gary, and the two of them come up with a plan for figuring out objectives. Herb seemed to embrace the idea in the meeting.
Well, I would accept the responsibility to work with Gary, but I think we're jumping the gun here. I think that we need to work out a little bit of the process before we decide on what the criteria are for success.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair game. So let's if we want to take one baby step forward, why don't Herb and I get together, talk about process, talk about how we can do this, and get back to you. And since we don't have a meeting coming next month, we'll have to be doing a lot of this by email. But I think among the board to start with, because I really feel strongly that, the core of interests in this project or whatever initiatives are taken is really our block association.
Do we want to wait 8 weeks before regrouping, or should we meet sooner?
I think that the preliminary discussions and meetings could start happening while we are waiting to see what's up with Cynthia, while we're waiting to see whether Peace Institute is actually going to do what they said they were going to do, and whether we want to continue working with them in the way they propose next. I don't see any reason why we can't talk about it quietly amongst ourselves in small groups to try to make headway.
Well, and to the extent that Gary and Herb are leading this, if they want to reach out to the Peace Institute and involve them in the process, that's their prerogative.
Right, and you
Right.
could say Cynthia's not available right now and.
I mean, we'll talk through with Cynthia when she's available, and I don't want to feel like we're, usurping her responsibility as the chair on this, but first step would be for Herb and I to get together and
I
see
agree.
what we can sketch out and get it off to all of you. And the second step might very well be getting a larger group of you together, and maybe with DOT or maybe not, depending on how we talk about the process on this. I'm happy to take a cut at it.
At some point soon, I think we'll need to include DOT, but not necessarily day one.
Yeah. So let's try to do it over the next few days then, Herb, and get started. And okay. If that's it.
Right,
Do we need a resolution appointing Herb and Gary to lead this, or is that just something they move forward with?
I'm comfortable with just entrusting them with the good sense and good judgment and good intentions to move forward. That's just my opinion.
Bylaws, we can do whatever we want. That's another discussion.
I just
Peter,
wanted to
you have
say,
your hand up. Go ahead.
yes, I wanted to mention this in the part of the discussion when we were talking about revenue and newsletter frequency and that kind of thing. Just something, and one other thing that has been talked about in the past in the Block Association was welcoming people to the east of Broadway on 102nd and 103rd Street into the Block Association. And I'd just like to put that point on the board as something that we could think about in the future as well. I'm not, it doesn't have to be a discussion, but I do recall that has been discussed in the past. And, having worked on Park to Park a lot with people east of Broadway, especially with the Columbia University building and the Toll Brothers and next door, they really see themselves pretty much as a part of this neighborhood too. So there may be an opportunity for growing the membership that way too, that I think it's worth thinking about. We don't have to discuss it. I just wanted to mention that in the context of what Hetty and Rich were talking about before, and the possible benefit of having more members.
Okay, so.
Okay,
Thank you, Peter,
that was-
Celia, you have that for the minutes?
One other completely disconnected thought is that I know that people had concerns that our meetings go way over an hour and we're past 9 o'clock. So I just want to raise that point.
Right, I've been trying to move us along, but on the other hand, figuring out how we can move forward on the open street seemed like it was worth a little traction. What did we decide about a resolution or not a resolution for Herb and Gary to move ahead? We're okay?
I'm fine with them. I think it's great that they're both willing to have this discussion. I don't,
Okay.
we need a resolution,
move on
so
then.
be it. But does anybody here object to the two of them having a conversation and coming up with something?
All right. Moving on.
We go.
Has anybody done anything about the bylaws?
I know I've said this before, but I'm in conversation with Lynn Elliott. We've moved forward several steps. She had food poisoning. There were all these other things going on, but she, I got the information from Celia that I needed to send to her. She's in the process of going through our bylaws and comparing it to a comparable, like a model of this kind of organization, New York State, and going to come up with some suggestions, which she will then either come to our first committee meeting or send to the group who's going to be on the committee. I'm a little reluctant to push her too much because she's very busy. She travels a lot and she's volunteering like the rest of us. But I will be back in touch with her in the next week or so and see where she is.
Okay,
Let
great
everyone-
progress. Well done. Some progress is plenty. Next on our agenda was the security guard rehire. I don't remember who was working on any kind of discussions of that, if anyone. All right, moving on. Last item on the agenda was Halloween planning. Mary,
Yes, I'm back. I will be
Okay.
planning.
excellent.
Not-
Give some
not to
thought
worry.
to what you would like to have included in the fall newsletter.
Yeah.
Because by mid-August or so, that's when that's all going to start to happen.
Okay. Not a
And
problem.
is there anything you need from any of us now in order to proceed?
No. That's the
All
short
right.
answer. No, if I do, I will reach out, but pretty self-contained at this point. And I will get something over to you by mid-August. I mean, if you have like a hard date, let me know and I can put it in my calendar so I don't miss it.
Okay.
But
I don't
will-
have it yet, but you'll be on the email when I announce the deadlines.
Okay, great.
Can
Fantastic.
I just say one thing, which my opinion, I don't know if other people agree, but we have a lot of money right now and there doesn't seem to be a security guard anytime soon. Maybe we could put a little more to the Halloween party, which will be one of our few community events in the last year. So, and
Yeah.
very successful one.
Yeah,
I don't have a number, but I just thought we could be a little more generous this year.
Yeah,
Do we
I just-
want to
I was just gonna say,
emulate? Oh, go ahead.
Hold on one at a time. Amy, were you
Sorry.
done?
Yeah, I was done.
sorry, I was just gonna
Richard,
say,
go. Oh, Mary,
last
you go,
year,
then Richard.
there was no funds taken out of the pot last year. I covered any out-of-pocket costs, just as like my personal donation for entertainment, for any like supplementary stuff, any supplementary decor, anything like that. So knowing now that we have some funds to work with, I can just think about some other ideas to maybe build out some of the activations, some of the offerings, some of, I can just brainstorm a bit more on how to build out the event.
All right, well, thank you for doing that, Mary, and don't let that ever become a hardship, please. We'd rather have your involvement than your dollars.
Not a problem. Happy to do it.
Okay, Rich, go. Rich,
I'm now in Chinatown, so it might still be noisy. Do
Pick
we
up some
want to try to
dumplings.
emulate some of the streets on the Upper West Side, like 69th Street and 95th Street, that have more wide scale events for Halloween beyond the parade, where we get houses to encourage them to decorate their houses and encourage houses to give out candy and make it a real street party?
That's what we've been doing. We reach out to all of the brownstones, ask them to decorate, ask them if they are willing to participate with giving out candy. That's in addition to the candy stations that we lay out on the block. We also offered a couple of activations. The past couple of years, we had like a stilt walker doing balloon animal. We had a balloon artist. Maybe we can do face painting. I mean, there's a couple of different things that we could potentially do, but again, knowing that we have some funds to play with in order to build out the block party piece of this outside of the parade, I think we can do some fun stuff.
all right.
What needs to happen for that? And those other blocks I mentioned, 69th and 95th, are just like far ahead in terms of like really making it feel like a celebration and getting participation from all the houses.
I'm not sure what the question is, but in terms of what the lead time is, I mean, I personally reach out to all of the brownstones. I put flyers out. I manage the decorations, the activations, the talent. I kind of wrangle the troops. So we have time.
We can't make brownstone owners participate if they don't care to. We ask, and that's happened for years, even before Mary took it over. And some do and some don't, and some years some do and other years they don't. And, you know, there's a lot of variability there that we don't have any kind of absolute control over. We can make it enticing and we can talk it up, and I'm sure Mary's very persuasive. But if somebody's not in town or somebody doesn't want to, or somebody's an older person and isn't interested, you know, we just can't. We could sit on their steps and give out candy and, you know, use the stoop, but we can't make them drink. We can, what's that expression? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Seems to
Any
me,
other, I'm sorry, go ahead, Herb.
now that Gary and I have been assigned tasks, I think we should assign Peter and Richard to get out there and beat up their neighbors and make them participate.
Great idea.
We have always been big Halloween decorators and candy dispensers and volunteers for the event. Now, Rich, I don't know, he's on mute now, so I can say whatever I want about his brownstones, but thank you, Herb. We'll kick him in the ass and make sure that he
Yeah, no, my
does a good
co-op is
job
two,
this year.
my co-op is 2 brownstones, 317 and 319.
Well,
And
so you,
we, I don't know that we were aware of the invite, or at least I wasn't.
Decorated.
Yeah,
asleep at
but
the switch, Robbins.
I know, but let's make it happen.
Okay.
And Mary, let's talk.
Anybody else have anything in the old business or new business category?
So our next
Going
meeting
once.
is September, is that what we've agreed on?
Yes,
Second
I'll look
Tuesday.
at my calendar. It's the second Tuesday,
And presumably,
which is the 12th.
okay, the newsletter will already be out by then. Right? Or roughly, it'll be coming out around
We,
then.
yeah, usually we don't aim for Labor Day weekend. We aim for the weekend after.
Right, okay,
Because that way people are back from wherever they've been and kids are done with camp and started school, and the frenzy of that transitional time is a little bit past. So it should be before our next meeting. But as we did in June, if we think that it behooves us to hold it a little bit, we can hold it a little bit.
I have one more question about the email, which has the links. We talked about telling people they could contact info at, which is Cynthia.
Right.
Should I add another name to that?
Yeah, I think for now it would be a good idea to have something else in addition to Cynthia, so that somebody else can be responding to stuff as needed.
Hetty, would you be willing to be that person?
I'm willing to be that person in terms of receiving stuff and passing stuff along, and I can write a quick response to somebody, but anything complicated, I'm gonna have to punt to somebody else.
Okay, I'm willing to
Hey.
be punted to, but I would prefer if you were the first contact.
I
So
don't
I'll
mind
put
receiving.
both you and Cynthia on there, so you're both receiving it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
My big
Speaking of
news, and I've
contacts-
mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, it's okay.
Speaking of contacts, I noticed on the website that there's email addresses for all of us at the Block Association, and I decided to test my email address to see if I got the email, and I did not. So does anyone know what those email addresses are and where they go?
Yeah, Bob used to be in charge of that, and now I am, and I added everyone, and I thought I tested them. But I'll talk to you separately, okay? And then what I could do is test everyone's, and I'll know if I don't receive it back from you, I'll know that it's not going through. It should be,
What's supposed to happen, Rich, is that it's just a blind name that then automatically shunts over to your personal email address.
Yeah, I assume that, but I didn't get it. And I want to make sure people know that if I'm not responding to them, it's because I'm rude, not because I didn't get it.
well, one good thing is that I am also the default email, so if something goes out and doesn't get delivered to somebody, it goes to me. So I'm getting a lot of weird emails from all over the city or for people who used to be on the board a long time ago. But let's talk separately. Let me see if I can figure out what happened with yours and I'll test the
Sounds
other.
great. Thank you.
Okay, but Amy, if you add me as an info at recipient, I will only receive new stuff coming in, stuff that might be sitting in
Right.
Cynthia's inbox is just sitting in Cynthia's.
We don't
inbox.
know. We don't know about that, but it's the new stuff.
If we can find out what's up with Cynthia, and or when she's coming home, I think it would be very nice to send her either some flowers or a fruit basket or something.
Yeah.
Anybody opposed?
We go ahead and do that.
Yeah,
Eddie,
well, you might check with the hospital to see if she can receive it. I mean, sometimes flowers are,
No, I meant once she was home. I have no idea what
Oh.
hospital she might even be at.
okay.
So I'm going to be in Manhattan in the next couple days and can do a flyby her building and see if I can get some details out of her doorman. And we'll proceed accordingly. I'll also send her an email that just lets her know that we met and this is what we covered and here's where we stand and got you covered, don't worry.
Sounds good.
Okay, anybody else? Anything else? We convened at 8:03, so we're just over the hour and 15-minute mark, which I think is not too bad, considering that we made some very constructive progress, I think, on the most divisive issue that's ever conquered our neighborhood. So, well done.
Okay.
See you all in September.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Have a
you,
great summer.
Good night, everyone.
Gary will be
Happy
in
holidays.
touch.
Good
Uh,
summer.
I'll send you an email tomorrow, Herb. Yeah.